I call this meeting of the Schertz-Cibolo-Universal City Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and the notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, and the time is 6 o'clock. Roll call, please. Very good. Well, welcome everyone tonight. This is going to be a short agenda. We only have one item to discuss, and we'll just see which way it goes. We're trying to figure out which way to go on our superintendent search, and we have a couple of decisions, not really a decision, but just which way we decide we want to go. And so we'll have hopefully a good discussion about that, and we'll go from there. Public comments, we have any? Very good, thank you. I'm going to call the item to discussion. We have a discussion item, the superintendent search process, and we have a presenter, Mr. Miranda.
Oh, good evening, board members. Dr. Ely? Yes, sir. Green? Good? It's taped. I don't want to. I'll just scoot over. There we go. All right. Good evening, everybody. So today, part of our discussion is going to be discussing the process review for the executive search services. Let me pull up the presentation. And so the purpose of this search is to find a firm and a consultant that's going to advise the board of the best practices and act as an agent for the board in all aspects of this search. This search is going to be a cooperative effort of the board and the consultants, with certain functions done separately and others done together. Both approaches will be within the guidelines and expectations set forth by the board. So we've been here twice since 2009. The previous method in 2019 was done through an RFP. That solicitation was awarded to TASB, Executive Search Services. During that solicitation, we received 4 responses, and the cost of those services was $9,500. Previously to that search, we did another solicitation or RFP in 2009. That was also awarded to the TASB Executive Search Services, and we received 6 responses at that time, and the cost of the services were also $9,500. So in this presentation, we're going to go over the scenarios and timelines of the methods that we have available for procurement. The scenarios that we have available are through RFP or request for proposals. We'll go over the considerations and the process for the RFP, as well as direct-to-contract and what that entails and the contract methods that we can utilize to decide and find a firm. So with the first scenario, we have the RFP process. The RFP has several components of it that must be included that we can't do the process without. The restriction to that is that since we have to include these components, our timeline is pretty stagnant. There's less flexibility in that timeline. So the components of the RFP process are the specification and bid development, the publication of the bid, the tabulation and evaluation process, the board approval, contract discussions between the awarded firm, and then award and implementation and discussions of moving forward. So this is a disclaimer to the admin here present and to anybody else watching. This is a condensed RFP timeline. This is the exception, not the rule. So looking here, this is just saying that we can get this expedited in the condensed timeline of 8 weeks. So we would have the specification and bid development taking about a week to meet with the interested or invested parties to come up with the scope. And the vendors we would want notified, as well as any of the services we would like to include. Next, we'd have the publication of the bid. We like to put that on the street normally for at least 30 days to allow the exposure to all of the vendors. Here, we have condensed it to 3 weeks. Then we have the tabulation and the evaluation process. This can range from days to weeks, depending on how many proposals are received and the time frame and time availability of those on the evaluation committee. Then we have board approval. We have 2 to 3 weeks designated here because dependent on when the proposals are closed. We have to consider when the next board meeting that's available for the board to be decided and award this proposal. So sometimes it's done early in the month and we can't go to board until the regular called meeting, which is later in the month. So we're sitting there for 2 to 3 weeks waiting until we can present this to be accepted. Then we have the contract discussions. Those usually occur very quickly, but because it requires some legal review, sometimes the communication back and forth between our legal team and their legal team can get delayed. And then we have award and implementation. Usually that's just going to be from when we've accepted the terms and conditions and then have the first initial kickoff meeting to discuss the process moving forward. All in all, that can be condensed to 8 weeks if everything runs smoothly. So next we have direct to contract types. We have the options through here of an interlocal agreement. Through the interlocal agreement, we have the government code and education code 44.031 that allows us to go into contract or an interlocal agreement with another entity. When we go through this process, we are actually able to utilize any of their solicitations and their awards to move forward through our process. With those, we also have a purchasing cooperative and the piggybacking option that kind of roll off of the interlocal agreement. I presented last board meeting the interlocal agreement resolution for a purchasing cooperative. The purchasing cooperative has already done the competitive solicitation process for us, has vetted everything that meets statutes and requirements, and has awarded the vendors, and so we're allowed to go straight to them to be used for the services and goods. The piggybacking is similar to the purchase cooperative, except we are utilizing an entity. We are contracting with only one entity or one school district to use their proposal or their bid. The draw to that one is we had to accept the award and the results of their evaluation. So their rankings or whoever they decided to go with, that is the selection that we will be making when we go with a piggybacking contract. Lastly, we have a request for information, or also known as an informal solicitation. The request for information takes in actually all of these factors through the interlocal agreement and allows us to kind of do our own process and reach out to vendors that have been awarded, have been procured through the competitive process, and select who we want to go through with that method. So with the direct-to-contract timeline, with this, it still requires a specification, but with this, we also have a vendor list development that we talked through. Because all of the vendors have already been awarded through the various cooperatives or interlocal agreements, we decide who we want to reach out to request a proposal or request a response. Usually that takes about a week. Then we release the request for quotes or information to the vendor. We can give them a week to respond. Because of this, there's no legal requirements for publication or any of the timeline. Then we have the tabulation and evaluation process. That can be 2 to 3 days because there is no formal process. You're just meeting of the minds, discussing what's the best route forward, and making a decision based off that. There is no grading criteria or anything involved in that process. Then you have contract discussions that can go from 2 days with the vendor, and that can always still go through the legal process and take longer. But because of this going through a direct-to-contract and they've already been competitively procured through another entity, you are accepting the terms and conditions of the previous award most times. So that doesn't really take that long. And then you have the award and implementation process, which can take 2 days. So all in all, the direct-to-contract timeline is 4 to 4 weeks. So, thank you.
Just a quick question for clarification. When you say the tabulation and evaluation process, most times you see this as like a subcommittee of the board who would come together and go through all of that, or are you talking about an open session where we're going through every respondent or everyone that choose to invite? How do you
Are you talking for this specific
talking about the
method or in?
contract timeline, the tabulation and evaluation.
But the tabulation and evaluation process, are you talking about for executive services?
Yes,
Okay. Yes, we could do that in session. We could, that would be up to the discretion of the board of how we want to come up with a decision of what we want to do. When we say it's informal, there is no record keeping that we must keep on file of the grading criteria, the selection, or anything like that with the bid folder in the actual formal process. We still go through it, but it's just not required or necessary or as formal.
Any comments?
So this is the process where we interview, or is that what you're talking about here, or no?
You can interview in both processes. This is the most flexible, so you can decide how you want to do this. If you receive 5 proposals and you want to say, all right, we like the top 2, top 3, or we want to discuss it further, or if you like the proposals received, you can decide just right from there who you want to go with.
So let's say just tonight, we threw out some names of folks that we wanted to see if we could get them to do interviews. How long would that process, I mean, we could do that tonight, correct?
Deciding who we want to interview?
Or who we would like to invite to interview?
Yes, we could do that if we would find out first if they are an awarded cooperative or in a local agreement or a contract that we can piggyback off of, and then we would request, an interview and get them under contract and start the services with them.
Okay, and so if we decided, let's say we decide 4 or 5 names tonight, how long would you need before they could be invited?
At least a week, because like I said, we wouldn't want to come up with the scope and the development and the services that we would want them to provide before asking them and inviting them to come out, so they know what we're looking for and what they would be wanting to provide for us.
Because many of these, I'm sorry, many of these would already be firms, though, that do this as a business.
Correct, yes, ma'am. Most of it would be boilerplate templates. So they would already have probably something on deck to submit to us and respond and be ready. And because most of these firms are so popular, I'm sure I'd be confident in saying that there is a contract somewhere that would be available for us to utilize and piggyback off of, or do an interlocal agreement to get them to provide their services right away.
Okay, so if we decided 4 or 5 tonight, I'm just throwing this out there, then we would be looking at a week where you would come back and say, yes, these folks can interview. Is that correct?
Correct, yes, ma'am.
And then, would they then say, hey, we need another week before we can present, or can they?
That would be, like I said, the flexibility of the board. You could say, you know what, you can't meet our deadline. We want to go with the vendors that can. That would be up to the discretion of the board. Like I said, it's not a formal process, so we have control over the timeline and the process and how we want to move forward.
So just hypothetically, let's say we picked some firms tonight. Would you say the 5th of October is too soon?
For the interviews?
Yes.
No, ma'am, I would not.
Any other thoughts? I'm just throwing that out there. I'm just working some numbers in my head.
No, and I've worked some as well. So if we were to decide tomorrow that we wanted to go with the direct-to-contract process, and we would be able to go through award and implementation ideally by October 20th. So that would be beyond the interview process. That would be through award and contract.
Why October 20th?
That was 4 weeks from tomorrow. Yes, 4 weeks from tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, they have to come back with a formal response, and then we would award at that time, right? Okay, so we would do the interviews on the 5th, and we went this route, and to get all the paperwork put together and get everything, about the 20th of October, or the 19th. I had to do the 20th, that's a Friday.
Yeah. Well, that would be me working on the 20th, not you.
So is it possible for them to have, whether it's October 5th or whatever, let's say there's 3 or 4 firms here, they go through, they submit proposals to the board, and they go through an evaluation process. Is it possible for the board to make a decision that evening as to the firm they wish to go with?
That would be up to the board. There's no restrictions or no guidelines or nothing hindering us from making a decision. We could even make one if they were on contract without any interview process. We could come to terms and decide what vendor we wanted to select and go straight to them and ask them to submit a proposal, execute the contract, and move forward.
So it's 2 to 3 days for the tabulation evaluation process would be if the board went through some sort of standard
Yeah, if they said
deal
that we had a rubric we wanted to each use to examine it or anything and kind of meet together and discuss what our findings and what we thought of each of the firms, that would be 2 to 3 days if they wanted to go that route. If they wanted to meet in one night and decide we want this firm and we're able to come to agreement and move forward, we would move forward.
So that's kind of the more quantitative route. You give different buckets of a matrix of how many points, and you go through and rate and
Yes, sir.
tabulate all that. And there could be, what you're saying is a more qualitative assessment of the firms to where the board just comes to an agreement, is like, we like firm X, Y, or Z. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
Correct? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is there any difference in transparency between an RFP and the other route, the direct route?
There is no difference because everything is kept in record and we have it on file on the contract file. The only difference is when you go through a formal process, it does require board approval. So it has an agenda item, it has the action item, and it has a discussion item following the purchase.
We wouldn't necessarily have to have a discussion item. We could have a discussion and action the same night if we expedite the process.
If we went through an RFP, is that what you're saying?
Right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the discussion is usually for general items, but if we wanted to expedite it, we could do a discussion and action the same night.
Correct, but we would also have the previous month while the RFP is in process to have discussion, so it really wouldn't save any time. There wouldn't really be any necessary requirement for us to do discussion and award in the same.
Tonight could be discussion as well. If you direct the administration to go forward with an RFP, then we will have discussed that tonight as well.
So last time we did this, we met on the 29th of August and we voted to pick a firm. And by that next Tuesday, they contacted us to start the ball rolling. If we had decided on the 5th, could conceivably we be put in motion that quickly?
Are you talking about the RFP process of
No,
the
not
last
RFP.
time, or? Okay.
Just picking the firm, like once we pick the firm. Because it sounds to me like once we pick the firm, there might be some other things here that take time. Whereas I do remember last time around, when we picked the firm, by the next Tuesday, the ball was rolling. We had contact with them and everything else. Is that conceivable?
Yes, ma'am, through the direct contract route, it is conceivable. Through the RFP route, once it's evaluated, our hands are tied until we have the next board meeting for it to be approved.
Right. I will say that last time around, we knew Dr. Gibson early in the summer was going to retire. And so we had time to do the RFP, and we knew it would take some time. And I believe there was a board discussion that talked about, at one time, long before most of us were even around, there was some interviews, probably when Putska was picked. No? I wasn't here. I don't remember. I wasn't here.
I wasn't also, but I believe it was an RFP done at that time too, when Dr. Puska was selected after Dr. Steele announced his retirement.
Okay, and I know there are many different options. I even remember at the July 23rd meeting back in 2019, there was one board member who said, let's just not do anything and just pick so-and-so and go from there. So we have many options in that regard.
So really, the decision tonight is really, do we go direct to contract or do we go with an RFP? And both of those start a ball rolling. The direct to contract is the quickest way because we are on a short timeline, but if the will of the board is to go with an RFP, then that's the way we'll go. The RFP does give you the advantage of anybody who's out there to send the proposal in, but it does take longer to evaluate that. Direct to contract simply is that we say these 4 firms are going to come in, or 3 firms, or whoever, and then we interview them straight away, and we get the ball rolling quicker. So really, it's up to the board to which way you want to go.
I think if we did the direct to contract though, we would have a superintendent more than likely in place, like we would before we go on break at Christmas, because there's a process there. Once you name the lone finalist, there has to be 21 days. That puts us into January. When you finally vote on that, that's mid-January. And if we would like to have someone in place by the time Clark retires, then we almost might be better off going with the direct to contract.
But I like to hear what everybody's thinking. I mean, there are advantages both ways.
As long as the transparency is the same, if the public has the same opportunity to speak, either way, then the expedited method would be my preference.
Nope. I'm more interested, I think Letitia's right. Probably direct to contract seems more logical at this standpoint, but either way, to Dr. Ely's point is, when it comes to the tabulation and evaluation process, we already have a matrix, or do we already, you know what I'm saying, is that, I know you said something about it's up to us, but,
So, so Mr. Miranda can create one. He can use examples of that. We could take an example and modify that based on, because most of the time, these are like weighted 40% for price, and then there's previous experience with the district and with other districts, and that, a matrix could be modified to meet the unique needs of this board in this search. And so, but if we did an RFP, it would absolutely be a part of the request for proposal. And if we wanted to use a matrix in the direct contract, that could certainly be created.
and so he would create it, and then we would be able to modify it, or discuss it and modify it. To that other point, specification and vendor list development, how much process, how much influence, input do we have as a board into that process, the scope of work?
All of it.
We help develop the
Yes, sir.
scope of work. So, Doctor, and I think we've all received, maybe we have received some emails, but one person said, hey, we can provide you 12 to 15, but I can try to tell you 12 to 15 like superintendent nominees or some applicants. But I think we got way more from TASB last go-around, and I don't know if it's on the board wants to get 12 qualified and somebody else sorts through the applications first, or do we wind up sorting through the bulk applicants first? When TASB did it, we sorted through all the
Are
applications.
you talking about 12 to 15 search firms, or are you talking about
No.
applicants now?
Applicants, there was one, I received something from somebody that said, hey, we'll provide you 12 to 15 applicants.
So I think that's a next level conversation. I
Okay.
think tonight, the focus is trying to get some clarification on the direction that the board wants to go vis-à-vis how to procure that search firm. And then I think those are questions that the board in that, if you do interviews with the search firm, would be asking that and seeking clarification from the firm.
Okay.
And you would make a selection that best met your needs for that and for others.
All right, I just didn't know if that would go into the scope of work that the board would develop, but I get it.
Once we get a search firm, then we would tell them how many we want, what the qualifications are, what we're looking for. And do we want a state search, a national search? What's our criteria? Tonight, we're just trying to figure out what method we want to use to get a search firm.
And that could be thrown in as an interview question. You can ask five last references and how many applicants did you get for your 5 last customers?
I was just wondering from a historical point of view why TASB was chosen twice. And should we go through a process that requires us to look at other organizations that could help us rather than just going directly to TASB?
No, we looked at other organizations last go-around. I think we always have, it's just that it,
But I'm saying TASB was chosen, obviously.
Well, the last few times we went through an RFP and TASB rolled to the top both times. So we did look at other firms. Just TASB just came along with the best overall search criteria, the best overall search capabilities, and price wasn't a factor. I mean, some of them came in at $30,000, and for the same quality of search, TASB ended up winning both of those. I was on both of those, and
Okay.
from my own point of view, TASB ended up being head and shoulders better than anybody else out there based on their history and also on the price, so. But
That's
again,
what I was
we're-
thinking, but-
Again, we're not wed to TASB. We can go whichever direction the board wants to go.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but there'll be a whole new, brand-new slate, and TASB will compete with whomever else is on there. That it's not a done deal. Am I right?
Correct. Yeah, whether you go RFP or not, we're still gonna be looking at different firms, who's gonna be best for our purposes.
I just think, I remember the deciding factor for TASB, at least for me last go-around, was they had like after a hire process. I don't want to go into, but they had a process after the fact, and they sort of guaranteed that if the superintendent didn't stay around for a while, they would go through the process of going, obviously.
No.
Timeframe that they were talking about.
Yeah,
No.
but, so,
Yeah, well, since I wasn't here, I was trying to figure out how you arrived at TASB twice.
Yeah, basically,
Yeah.
TASB guaranteed to work.
exactly.
If it didn't work out, then would come back with no additional fee, and we'll go through the process again. So nobody else was willing to do that, as I remember. So it really, right now, boils down to which way do we want to go? Do we want to go in RFP? Historically, we've gone RFP, but that's when we had plenty of time. We don't really have that time this time around, but the process would essentially be the same. we would just cut out the possibility of, getting a dozen firms to come in and say, we want your work, versus we're going to invite certain individuals that we think are going to do a good job. I mean, but the thing is that if all of them come in and none of them are going to do a good job for us, we can go back to this again. And there are districts that will go through with a search firm, and they'll look at 6 or 8 superintendents, and none of the superintendents are they wanting to go right back through the process again. That does happen, but we're just trying to expedite the process going with a direct-to-contract timeline. So,
Is there any opposition? Because I haven't heard any yet to direct the contract.
waiting to hear everybody's comments.
No, I think the timeline, with everything else equal, the timeline is great with the direct contract.
We do have Dr.
Because
Edwards waiting in the
RFPs.
wings in case, but
RFP is going to drag it out longer than we need to.
So if we do the direct contract, could we throw out some names? Like, do we feel comfortable doing that? Throwing out some names? Names of search firms? And making the decision to narrow it to like 4 or 5 tonight?
I'm fine with it. Is there any opposition to what you just said? Nope.
How would we know whether we would prefer those 4 over any others?
Can I say something real quick? It's, to my knowledge, there's been 6 search firms that have expressed an interest, either through a conversation with the superintendent or direct emails to various members of the board. I don't know if you want to start with those 6 or more or less, or I just wanted to throw that out there because I'm not sure that everybody got every email.
Can you give us a list?
Sure. Hazard, Young, and Atia have been discussed. Thompson and Horton, JG Consulting. I believe some of you received something from Ray and Associates. I believe some of you at least received something from Into Learning, and I believe some of you received something from TASB Executive Search Services. Anybody else receive anything from anybody else? Thank you.
I mean, those are the ones that have expressed interest. They already know it's out there, that we probably wouldn't get that many more through an RFP process. So we want to invite all 6 that have expressed interest, then we cover all the bases. Those people have already expressed interest.
Well, obviously, if they expressed interest, they're going to help us expedite the process, right?
I would think.
I'm fine with those. I will say that several of these, just in talking to other districts, the trustees that have picked, have done this process before. They've used a mixed bag of these, and they all said all of them are really good. No one did, like nobody, there weren't a bunch of them that picked TASB. It was kind of even all over the place as to whether they picked Thompson and Horton, JG, TASB, Hazard and Young, Ray and Associates. So they said all of them, for the most part, were pretty good.
You concur, Dr. Ely?
I would concur. I've only been on the superintendent search from the superintendent side. But I do know, let me just look at them real quick. I do know individuals, I think I know, yes, at every one of those, and I respect all of them. Most are former superintendents with exemplary records in the state. And all of them have done a fine job on various searches.
So if we invite these folks, are we looking at what, 20, 30 minutes per firm?
That would be up to you. You would determine how much, a lot of time you want to give them. I would just recommend you stay consistent. If you want to give an hour, they all get an hour, and just make sure you stay.
That's 6 hours.
Yeah.
That's a really,
Use that as a nice round number.
Yeah.
If I remember right, last time I gave them like 20 minutes.
It was no more than 30. I know.
Right, no more than 30. I think it was 20 minutes. They came in, made their presentation, and next group came in, they shook hands, said good luck, and they sat down, we were done.
Maybe it was 20 with, you saw the videos, was it 20 and then we had question and answers, or was it 20?
I saw it too. Right.
But we didn't interview anybody?
Would we be able to have information from them ahead of time before they interview?
We can request that.
To also, so if we say 20 minutes, 30 minutes, we that's a short time, we may not have questions, but if we have information ahead of time, we can be prepared to know about them, have information, and have questions.
Ms. Thomas, some of them have already sent in proposals, and the firms that I talked with a couple of weeks ago were prepared to have a proposal in the latter part of the week before they were to come in. So that's pro forma. They would send the proposal on ahead, let you guys look at it, and that would include, obviously, price and, the different à la carte items of what the board might choose to add into the search, included in that.
And you would also only be interviewing those that submitted a proposal that showed interest in the position. If you sent out, they requested them and they didn't respond, we wouldn't proceed with including them in the bunch.
Because they're all going to do a full court press to get our business. So they're going to be, whatever we want to do, they're going to be doing that. So if we establish a 20-minute limit with 10 minutes for questions and answers, we can do that. So really it's up to us how we want to do it. But yeah, if we ask for 6 and we get 6 back, great, then we set aside time for 6. If they only get 4 back, then that's what we do. So is everybody okay with us doing direct contract? Okay, so we have consensus of the board to go forward. Okay, the ones that have sent us information or expressed interest at this point in time, like Dr. Ely said, was Hazard & Young, Thompson & Horton, JG Consulting, Rain Associates, Into Learning, and TASB Executive Services. Is everybody okay with it? Extending invitations, those 6 firms?
Yeah, I was just curious about whether, I don't know how far away these firms are, but to travel all the way here for 10 minutes, okay, 20.
Mr. Schwartz, this is what they do. They're retired superintendents.
We don't have
This
to
is
worry
what they
about
do.
Zoom
No,
calls.
no, sir. They'll be here. All of these have representatives within the state of Texas. Rain Associates and Hazard Young T are big national firms, but Hazard Young individuals in New Braunfels and Rain Associates is in South Lake. They'll be fine.
Okay.
I will say that we invite 6. I don't know that all 6 would come. Sometimes it depends on if they have something that night. They've got interviews with a current search they're on, or if their timeline's not really matching up with ours based on the number of searches. What search firms don't want to do is have 2 on the same kind of demographic going at the same time. It's kind of important for them to be able to get one put to bed and then start another one. So hopefully, and you guys are sure you want 6. Is that right?
Oh, we're fine with that.
Okay. So we'll see how many would say yes.
I would think to be fair, since they've already established interest, then I think it'd be fair to invite them.
So kind of going back to what I asked in the beginning, the 5th, is that a reasonable time frame to ask these folks to be ready to present or submit to us in the 5th of October?
A week from Thursday.
In my opinion, I think it's tight but doable.
Because I don't want like 4 of them to come back and go, no, we can't do the 5th. So,
But they would respond. How quickly could you get an answer? If they
I can start calling tonight and certainly call tomorrow morning. And then we'd know. I mean, I guess we could monitor and adjust and say we invite 6, but 3 of them can't make it, and then we'll go back to the drawing board.
so could we agree that you ask for the 5th, and then if they're all disagreeing, then the 10th? Could we, okay,
5th is the first. We'll try for the 5th because we
Right.
already have one scheduled.
yes.
Right. And if we can't do that, we can always do the 10th and go from there, because our regulars are 17th. So we don't want to add that to the regular agenda for the 17th. So yeah, 5th or the 10th, whichever one's best.
Mr. President, can I ask a question real quick? It is the will of the board for, you guys want me to do the contacting of this? You don't want the president or president's out of pocket tonight, or the vice president or somebody else to do that? I'm happy to do it, happy not to do it. You guys give me direction.
Dr. Ely, I'm in favor of Dr. Ely.
Okay.
Since you've already made some initial contacts, we might as well do that way, make it easy. Because at some point in time, then the superintendent's going to have to step back anyway, and then it will be up to the board president to continue on. Once the interviews happen with the superintendents, then that's something the board president will have to do no matter what.
So I'm just concerned about Mr. Swart not being here. I mean,
He
it'll
said
be
he trusts
recorded,
us.
right, so,
He's missing the selection of the search firm, not interviews of
so are you
superintendent
okay with
candidates.
it?
Mr. President, as I talk with these firms, would it be the intent of the board for whoever is awarded on either Thursday the 5th or Tuesday the 10th to be in attendance in closed session at the regularly scheduled board meeting on the 17th to hammer out all the last kind of details and timelines and those types of things? So if that's what we're targeting, I just want to get that on their radar and see if that's amenable to them, if that's the timeline that we would like to go.
One thing they need to understand is that we are trying to expedite this process. And hopefully that can accommodate us on that. But yes, I would think so. Go ahead.
I think it's important for those who may see this video is we want an expedited process, but we don't want to cut any corners by which, you know what I'm saying, we want to find a quality candidate, find a quality superintendent. So we don't want, I don't want anybody to think that we're trying to cut corners to the point that, you know what I'm saying? So,
We're still going to do
We
the
want the
interview
very best.
process. We're still going to try to find the best search firm we
Exactly.
can get our hands on. We're simply saying that these firms have already expressed interest. We're going to bring them in. I'll go through the RFP process, but we're still going to ask them all the same questions we would ask. We went through the RFP process, and we're still going to make the best decision for a search firm so we can find the best superintendent.
Right, and it actually doesn't wind up being too much, too expedited, because we had decided that we would not be doing interviews until the new board member is selected and on board. So, you know, that still puts us the end of November at the very earliest to do interviews. And so the window that the superintendent application process is open is probably 4, 5, 6 weeks. And if you look at that, we're still working in the timeline. We're still, I think it's not necessarily super expedited. I think we're moving at a pretty good pace.
So the firms that'll come in and interview, do presentations on either October the 5th or the 10th, it is anticipated the board will make a decision that evening. That's correct. So it'll be interviews and an action item that night. Okay, and then invite them back on the 17th. Okay, thank you.
So is everybody okay with that timeline? Go ahead.
yeah, I think that's appropriate. Is there any information we need to sort of compile that we might want them to present in order to make a I don't know, I'm just sort of saying, they give a presentation, then we're like, well, what about this, this, and this, and they don't have time to sort of give us the best answer, in which case we're like, I really want to maybe consider this firm if they had this data point. So if there's a data point you're thinking about, maybe we can present it, give it to them beforehand. That's just my take. I don't know what it would be, but I want to give every firm the opportunity to give us the very best information.
I would agree if there's something that you're going to be looking for, everybody needs to know about it before they come, so they're prepared to address that in the presentation. So let me know if there's something that you'd like me to ask for.
Yeah, if there's a specific concern that somebody has, yeah, give them a heads up. The thing is that when you get into question and answer session, toward the end of it, you're going to be basing your questions on their presentation anyway. So if they didn't hit something that's important to you, then you ask that question at that time, and hopefully they can give it back to us. Because every firm's kind of a little bit different presentation. In my experience, has always been they're kind of boilerplate, but then again, there are some variations between them. So some of the questions end up being clarification questions that you ask and say, okay, what about this, what about that? But yeah, if there's something really important, yeah, definitely give them a heads up. I agree with that. We didn't do it in the RFP process because they had already been vetted by the administration, but we're going to be kind of doing that vetting on the fly. So I think it'll work out. So is everybody okay with kind of what we figured out tonight? No, just consensus. So, okay, so we're looking at October 5th. We're gonna invite 6 firms noted, and if we can get October 5th, then that'd be great. If not, then we'll be back to October 10th, and then we can establish our guidelines between now and then, probably 20 minutes for their presentation and maybe a 10-minute question and answer, but that can be hammered out between now and then. go forward. Now, and-
I'd appreciate you telling them. So if 20 and 10 is good, then 20 minutes for presentation and a little bit more for questions, if you should have them.
I think it's what we did last time, was 20 and 10, if I remember right.
And
The scope of work, who's going to decide? It's us? So when will that happen?
well, I think
Okay. They will present a scope of work.
Oh, they
That's
will.
part of their presentation. They'll
Okay.
say, we're going to come and meet 6 times in the district, and we're going to do these focus groups, and we're going to do this survey, and we're going to deliver you a superintendent profile. They will lay all of that out, and you've got to decide, yes, okay, we want all of these, or we like this firm's scope of work better than the other firms, and some of them will be like, well, we can do all of these, which, we can do this for an extra $2,500. Do you want it or not? So they'll
I
be.
thought we had more on the input side, but I get it. All right.
If we were to do an RFP, yes, we would specify what the scope of work would entail, and they could have some stuff on top of that.
Fair enough. Thanks.
We can negotiate that once we decide the firm, or we can actually ask them that night, what's your scope of work like? They'll probably tell us what the scope of work looks like, if I remember correctly. So then we can decide we like this or not.
And would you like me to communicate with Dr. Ely on the matrix or the scoring criteria, and then him communicate that with y'all, and just kind of go communicate
think
that
so.
way?
And yes, and you guys, I think we're going to need to think about whether you want to use this type of matrix or have it be a little bit more holistic. And it's up to you. We can put a draft one before you, matrix.
You were saying maybe quantitative versus qualitative, or we're going to have both quantitative and qualitative?
You have more flexibility to do both this method. When you do an RFP, it's basically strictly quantitative.
So, but that's a discussion we can have when we choose a search firm on the 5th or the 10th is which way we want to go with that. So it's something we can be thinking about, what's important.
It sounds to me like they're all equally qualified, just a matter of a preference on our part. And I'm more concerned about us arriving at what we want in a new superintendent than who's the search firm. Although we've already got a good list right now. So I'd rather spend my time thinking about what the new superintendent needs to be like, rather than, are they going to do this, are they going to do that? Because they'll tell us that, and we pick.
Right.
It's just like a menu.
And that's like a search firm. We basically tell them, here's what we're looking for in the superintendent. You're going to have community outreach. You're going to have, they're going to talk to the staff. They're going to talk to everybody, and they'll come up with a profile for a superintendent. And we can come back and say, here's what's important to us as a board. So that'll all be in the process when we decide on a search firm. So, exactly. So, is everybody okay with those dates and that process? We got anything else? So that's what we're going to, so we're going to do the 5th or the 10th and the 6 firms we noted earlier, and we'll see what we get. Okay, you got any other business?
See what you did there. Wow, Mr. Miranda. I don't know if I'll be there in February, but okay.
Okay, and that concludes that agenda item, and motion to adjourn. So move, we're adjourned.